okay, with the cat out of the room, it is time to do another episode of There Will Be Movies. This is EnterTheRealWorld.com, and this is There Will Be Movies, a podcast covering 25 of our favourite, not best in our opinion, just our favourite movies from a given decade. This is Volume 1, 2000 to 2009, Episode 22, The Wrestler. Benjamin, how the heck are you?
I'm good. I've eaten a bag of chocolate, which is probably ill-advised. I've rushed home from work, and I need to go get the cat out of the room, literally.
You made me a liar.
No, leave. Gone. How unprofessional of me.
Yeah, somewhat. I feel like garbage and haven't eaten anything, so we'll see if I can make it through the podcast. I will soldier on like a broken old wrestler trying to soldier through his last match.
I've got to make a curry after this, so...
Okay. This was chosen by you, which people who are listening to this and know me, we're just going to get this out of the way. The most embarrassing thing about me, I am a lapsed / infrequent fan of professional wrestling, so I am uniquely qualified to talk about this. However, I did not pick this. You chose this. And I am shocked you picked this, given I went through most of our friendship thinking Requiem for a Dream was like your favoritist film ever. And I was for sure thinking it was going to be on the list, but you chose The Wrestler.
I think that like this stretch of 4 movies he does now are like all 5-star masterpieces, and I kind of liked that. Not that we're going to bookend it, but like we're going to finish this series, or one of the last episodes is going to be The Wrestler, and one of the first episodes, the next one's going to be Black Swan. Spoilers for... like a year from now.
Oh god, yeah.
I mean, these 2 movies kind of... There was originally an idea that like it was going to be a romance between a ballet dancer and a wrestler.
Right.
Was like an idea for the script. Rather than a stripper, it was going to be a ballet dancer.
Okay.
And the kind of 2 scripts kind of like slowly parted. And obviously like Robert Siegel doesn't have any involvement in Black Swan, but I just kind of like the kind of like flip nature of The Wrestler and Black Swan as being like the 2 movies from Aronofsky that we would cover. Even though I think The Fountain is a tremendous movie, but I also wouldn't force you to watch it because it is almost incomprehensible. And Requiem for a Dream is the first 18 I ever watched, I think. Yeah. And I was part of a video game forum kind of like when I was 13, 14 years old, and one of the site admins posted this like really long glowing review of Requiem for a Dream. And so me being 13, 14 years old and highly impressionable from this guy who like works for this website was like, I'll go watch this movie, and it fucking destroyed me. And so I kind of like I went back and filled in Pi watching that, and just kind of like, oh wow, Pi is really good, really interesting. Like my first like proper independent tiny movie shot black and white in New York for literally no money.
Yeah.
And then I was on a plane to, I want to say Florida would be like probably, it was a long flight, and they had The Fountain playing on the flight, and I was like,
that's not a place to watch that.
I watched that on the flight on the tiny little back screen, like not even like modern day like decent screen kind of thing. It was like one of those like back of the screen.
Yeah.
You have to tilt it a little bit to get like a clean image to watch The Fountain, which is one of the most visually gorgeous and stunning sound-wise movies I've ever seen. And watched it on the back of this thing and came away from it thinking like, this is maybe the best movie I've ever watched in my life. Like my little kind of like 15-year-old self kind of going like, wow, this has changed my life.
But you didn't want to put me through it.
I didn't want to put you through it. And then obviously I've watched it so many times since then. I own the Blu-ray and all the rest of it. But like, yeah, that was my like these first 3 Aronofsky movies I saw in like at home on DVD and in an airplane, and I still completely and utterly love them. And so this was like, after The Fountain completely bombed, Aronofsky kind of like went away for a few years. Like he was rumoured to be directing an episode of Lost, which he had to drop out of. He was going to do the question mark episode in season 2, but he never got around to doing that. I don't know if he was on a Batman or a
he was
movie in between these 2. I don't know if he was in line for either of those things.
He was gonna make like Year One, and it was gonna be real fucking weird. Go listen to the Tape Crusaders and EnterTheRealWorld.com. I think either in our Batman Begins episode or our like Schumacher double bill episode, I think I got into his ideas for Year One, but it was out there.
Yeah, so he's circling superhero movies, but The Fountain bombs. I think kind of people leave him be. Maybe there were cursory talks of him doing Wolverine Origins. I can't remember what the order is. He definitely signed on to do The Wolverine, though.
He did. One of the most dull films in that genre.
Yeah, but before that, he kind of like recoups his losses and does this tiny little movie. Like, it's only made for $6 million. Mickey Rourke is completely like
uncastable.
yeah, uncastable in any movie. Just kind of go like, if I can make this work, then maybe I can have a career again.
And you know what he did? He got him a part in Iron Man 2, so all worthwhile.
the greatest legacy of this movie.
Birth.
Yeah. So I'm like at this point? So it's 2008. So I'm 16 years old at this point, just kind of going like, I want a new movie from this guy. I want to go see it in a cinema. And so I'm following every bit of news about this movie. And yeah,
I was obviously aware it was coming because there are all these stories in the wrestling world of like, oh yeah, like Nicolas Cage is going to all these wrestling events. They're making a movie apparently. And then it obviously would morph, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we've covered most of what we normally talk about at the beginning here. Robert Siegel used to be a writer for The Onion, and then he just comes out with this fucking script. It's like, whoa, wow. And he would go on to do The Founder, which I think that makes logical sense, but then he also did stuff like Turbo, which was the animated snail movie, I think.
I mean, Big Fan's really good, which is kind of like the flip of this, which is Patton Oswalt as like a huge fan of an American football team. Is the New York Giants, I think, is who it actually is. And yeah, it's just one of those kind of like this, it's kind of like someone who obviously understands the world of this doing a kind of like commentary on what it means to be immersed in this world, perhaps to kind of like damaging levels.
Yes, well, I mean, the feedback to this was generally that two-sided coin. It's either this is a wonderful sort of look into this, and also this is a harmful sort of... Not all of them are like this, and I think the people that are like that are just a little bit sensitive, and I think it's like, we're not saying every retired wrestler is like this, and there are... it's just, you know, this is what can happen. Robert Siegel is in the movie. He gets an autograph from Mickey Rourke near the beginning. But let's do what we normally do here. So, released December 17th, 2008 in the US, but slid into January 16th, 2009 in the UK. We talked about 2008 last week, but if you want to talk about sort of the opening numbers for this movie and, you know, what it was up against at the time.
Yeah, so it opens number 8 at the UK box office with a equivalent of $1.18 million, but it opens up behind such classic movies as Slumdog Millionaire, the future Best Picture winner of that year, £7, the movie where Will Smith commits suicide.
Yep.
Role Models, really good movie.
Yeah, pretty good.
It's the only movie to use Christopher Mintz-Plasse well.
Other than Superbad.
Other than Superbad and Kick-Ass. It's like those three movies are the only movies that understand.
Look, his cameo in Pitch Perfect is the stuff of legend, so... They didn't even invite him back for the sequels, did they?
No, they didn't. My Bloody Valentine, Bride Wars, Beverly Hills Chihuahua, and Defiant.
Sorry. Yeah, okay.
I watched this movie opening day at the Bracknell Odeon in Bracknell.
That's a funny place for the Bracknell Odeon to be.
I know it is. I don't know why I did the confirmative there. This was the same screen that I saw Whiplash in about 6 years later.
Nice.
So like this is a very good screen for me. Is going to see movies in this particular cinema for whatever reason.
Yeah. These two, Beverly Hills Chihuahua, all the hits.
And then I watched this movie and kind of like the final scenes kind of like so completely, utterly destroyed me. I just kind of had to sit there in kind of like stunned silence for a little bit next to my friend. And then I had to overhear two people loudly who were sat behind us the entire movie walk out and go like, well, that was fucking bullshit. There wasn't even the like WWF in there or anything like that. And it was like the most painful thing. Like, and obviously I know nothing about wrestling. I've never watched wrestling in my life. What I've know is like osmosis from people who watched it at school.
You saying you're better than Werner Herzog?
Yes, I'm better than Werner Herzog. But yeah, like watching these two people go out, even like I understood that's like, no, this is a completely different brand of wrestling to the kind of like mainstream worth millions and millions of dollars kind of like thing that you were expecting this movie to be about.
Well, that's the point. It's about what that millions and millions of dollar wrestler can turn into, and it can go down this path. It is 109 minutes. I think it is a good length. I don't think there's anything in there that I would be like, well, this portion sucked, let's get rid of it.
It is really lean, especially in terms of like there's literally only 3 characters who have like any significant speaking roles. I think like the two people who have like the most words apart from like those main 3 are Mark Margolis, who's like Aronofsky's like most frequent collaborator, and Judah Friedlander from 30 Rock.
I know.
It's like those two, and that's about it, really.
So, you already said $6 million budget, tiny. It did make $45 million. Helping to keep that budget to $6 million, Axl Rose donated Sweet Child of Mine for free. They only paid Mickey Rourke $100,000, some of it in cash, and Bruce Springsteen wrote them that gorgeous song for free as well. I'm sure he made some money off it himself, but yeah.
I mean, it's a bonus track on the album he had out around then, which I think is part of the reason why it wasn't at the Oscars as well. But
that's bullshit, man. He wrote it for, they went backstage at his gig and he played it for them acoustically. He's like, oh, here's what I've got. And it's like, how does this not an Oscar song? Oh, whatever.
It's such a weird thing where, the Oscars normally have 5 nominations for Best Song each year, and this was the year where they kind of came out and went, 3. This year we do 3, 2 of which are going to be from Slumdog Millionaire. And that Slumdog Millionaire soundtrack is really good, but it feels utterly bizarre to kind of completely snub the boss writing a song for this movie.
Look, the Oscar music category is bullshit. 3 6 Mafia won a fucking Oscar. That's bullshit. Anyway, as we said, Siegel wrote this movie. It was featured on the Hollywood Blacklist, this script. Aronofsky's company were like, yep, we'll get this going. Fox Searchlight ended up buying distribution rights for $4 million or something like that. So almost the entire budget of the movie. Now, Darren Aronofsky says that Mickey Rourke was always his first choice, but due to who that man was, let's not be unkind and say is, they had to look at some other people. One of those was Sylvester Stallone, but he had done Rocky Balboa in recent history. Have you seen Rocky Balboa?
I've not seen Rocky Balboa. I've not seen any of the Rocky movies apart from the first one.
Right, well no, we're not doing all of those. Rocky Balboa is wonderful. It does some of the things this movie is doing, and I think it does some of them better, but overall, it isn't hitting this level of, emotional and technical brilliance, but, the one last fight type thing, and anyway. So they thought, that's too similar, let's not go down that road. Nicolas Cage is the most famous, I think some people tell it as, it was Nicolas Cage's role, and then he got cold feet and backed out, and they replaced him with Mickey Rourke. But depending on who you ask, he either decided he needed a lot more time to prepare and wasn't willing to do steroids. What a shocking stance. Or he was asked politely to step aside for Mickey Rourke. And yeah, I think Aronofsky says one thing, Cage says another. But yeah, he did some training. He attended some wrestling shows for research. He was spotted ringside a lot. And I can't imagine Nicolas Cage doing this at all. I'm just seeing him as Cameron Poe in Con Air, but with a little bit more muscle, and it's I don't know.
I think you'll find he'd be more like his Superman role when he had the long hair.
Noted horrible racist asshole Hulk Hogan claims he was asked to do it. Aronofsky's like, fuck no, he wasn't asked to do it. There is no reason anyone would have asked him to do this. It wouldn't have made sense, because, I mean, you alluded to it, they're millions of dollars wrestling, and, I think it's kind of tricky throughout the film to gauge what level of fame he was at, and I don't think he was, a Hulk Hogan level of wrestler, the world's most famous wrestler. I think he was a known name within this industry on a national stage, but I don't think he was, a huge millionaire breakout mainstream star or anything. So I don't think it would have made sense to cast the most recognizable wrestler of all time.
Who would you like? Roddy Roy Piper with that kind of level?
Like a Roddy Piper, maybe like a Dusty Rhodes. Just these people that were very big in their sort of territory, and then weren't quite major national stars. I don't know. It's
1980s wrestling is very different to kind of what it became in the 90s, wasn't it?
yeah, a little bit. I mean, it was all, everyone still believed it, so it was a little bit hackier, and then the 90s it all became very Jerry Springer and soap opera and weird sex stuff.
When does Vince McMahon
took his company national in the late 80s, in the mid to late 80s, I think. And then, the Hulk Hogan was the hottest thing going in the sort of late 80s to early 90s. He's a horrible man, but he became the world's most famous wrestling owner. Mickey Rourke was not a fan of this script either. He's not a fan of wrestling, but Aronofsky let him rewrite all of his dialogue, so he was like, okay, and he did it.
It really does sound one of the things I really love about this is that all of Mickey Rourke's lines, they just have a really nice kind of cadence and flow to them. They feel very natural coming out of him.
Yes, 100%, which is why it was sort of shocking to hear he didn't give a shit about wrestling, because it's it seems like you really get this, and you feel very natural here.
Well, I mean, obviously, like a bit of backstory on Mickey Rourke is obviously like he was the kind of like pretty boy actor back in the kind of 80s and early 90s, and then he kind of disappeared and did boxing.
Yeah, he sure did.
And basically came back, and his face was just completely fucked up from doing this, and it really did kill his career because he was the kind of heartthrob guy back in the day, and then so it kind of feels like this is one of those movies that does feel like very metatextual in terms of like this is a guy who was big in the 80s who is just chasing the kind of like nostalgic high of back then.
Can you imagine in like the early 2000s saying one day Robert Downey Jr. and Mickey Rourke will headline one of the biggest movies of all, well, not of all time, but a huge movie like for Disney. Not Disney at the time, but yeah.
It is utterly bizarre to think that like even a year after this, because obviously like Robert Downey Jr.'s like career is kind of like both of them have this big comeback this year. Really, I mean RDJ's obviously done a couple of kind of like big things, but this is the year that Iron Man comes out, and Mickey Rourke ends up with an Oscar nomination at the end of it all.
Which he deserved.
Which he deserved. So before we get into the actual movie, what do you think's his better role? Do you think he's better here, or do you think he's better in Sin City, which is like the other big kind of like Mickey Rourke role that probably like helped him get?
I think he's better here. I think it's like it's an emotional ranged performance, like, and he has achieved a total lost in the role. I'm no longer looking at Mickey Rourke. I am looking at Randy the Ram Robinson. Like, he has done it, and I feel, he was kind of a laughing stock for a while, and like, Mickey Rourke, and then he fucking crushes it with this. I was like, whoa, where did that come from? For some people, for me, it's this. Like, obviously, he's, Sin City's very cool, and he's very.
I think he's my favourite actor in Sin City. I think he's the person who's kind of like most on the level of what that movie's trying to be.
Well, I think we can all agree Josh Hartnett's opening scene was the best thing in Sin City, but yes. Yeah, Mickey Rourke, very memorable in Sin City as well.
I mean, I think he should have won the Oscar for this. I've seen Milk. It's fine. I don't think the best bit of that movie is Sean Penn.
Look, you can't stop Sean Penn at the Oscars. He's going to win them.
I don't know. It's just one of those things where like this so I don't know if I said it on the podcast, or I said it just to you, where like these kind of movies of which are just like the main selling point of them is an actor doing a good performance are never my thing. And Milk feels like that kind of thing where like the selling point of that movie is this is Sean Penn embodying this kind of like very famous political figure from America who's very important to kind of like the gay rights movement. Whereas this feels different in that I think Aronofsky is a more interesting visual director than Gus Van Sant was on Milk.
Wow. Yes.
And also, I just think that like there is something here where they are creating this character whole cloth for this movie. Which I mean, obviously, like an acting performance is an acting performance, but I think there is just something so fully realised about this character in this world in this movie, and how perfectly that he manages to embody it, that just kind of like elevates this performance above what Sean Penn is doing in Milk. I mean, I'm also annoyed that the rest doesn't get Best Picture nomination, but this is the last year that the Oscars do the 5 nomination things, mostly spurned on by the fact that The Dark Knight didn't get a nomination, which, I mean, like, those two movies both probably should have been in the top 5 movies of the year over stuff like The Reader and Frost Nixon, but that's...
Oscar bait. Yeah. Wow. Let's do it. So, professional wrestler Randy the Ram Robinson was maybe the biggest act in the business, one of them anyway, 20 years ago. But you cut to now and he is working small, local shows, struggling with both his money and his age or his health. They go hand in hand. So, I think the opening montage, the sort of 80s magazines and the pounding audio over the top of it and everything, and then moving straight to the shot of him coughing in a corner of like a fucking elementary school classroom, like that's like an iconic shot from this movie, him sitting in the distance in that corner, no extreme close-up or anything. It's very jarring. It is very like, yeah, this is what it can be like. Some wrestlers are working shows in front of like 50 people or less, and I mean, I don't know how many of them are in fucking schools, but like it didn't strike me as like out of sorts, but I would imagine it was probably a bit of a shock for some people to see something like this, like him getting changed changed in a school classroom.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great kind of like shift from like you expect it to be something like kind of like monumentous and this huge kind of like triumphant moment, and it's just not. Even down to kind of like when he gets paid at the end of it, and the guy's just like,
he gets shorted because they didn't make as much money for the whole event as he thought. So it's like, well, here you go. This is what you get. Next time,
this is what you get. Yeah, you're coming to this next event that I'm doing, even though I've not paid you what I told you I'd be able to pay you.
A hot dog and a handshake, brother. That's a thing. Some wrestlers get paid a hot dog and a handshake when they're starting out. And he's like living in this trailer, which he gets locked out of because he hasn't paid his rent. He sleeps in his van, and it's a very carny road warrior kind of life when you're coming up. A lot of sleeping in cars and on floors and stuff, but like to see this guy that, if we are to take that opening montage, like you would expect this dude to at least have like a big fucking house somewhere, and you never find any of that out, like what his life was like then. You just hear him telling stories about the good old days, and there's never any allusion to like, oh, I used to have this like giant fucking mansion, but it's like you are left to think, well, he must have had a house and things went very bad for him and now he's in this trailer. It's just, again, like they're really hammering it home immediately, and like seeing him taking shifts at a supermarket but no weekends because he still is wrestling and he's wearing the fucking hearing aid and everything. Like,
yeah,
it's so jarring.
I love how this movie's shot, because this is... If you've seen the other Aronofsky movies, there's kind of like something very unique visually about them. Yeah. Like there's a lot of kind of like intense cutting and stuff like that. And then this movie comes out and it's not that. He's kind of like... It
wanders. Like the camera just sort of drifts around. There's a lot of long shots and a lot of improvised takes and
I mean, one of my favourite things is there's a fairly iconic shot that Aronofsky did, was called the story cam, where he attaches a rig to an actor at their waist with the camera kind of in front of them. So when you walk, the background kind of moves, but the person stays in the same place in the frame. And he kind of like inverts it in this, where it's a handheld camera, but you're following the actor.
All the shots of him like wandering through the physical space of like the supermarket or wherever. You're so invested. You're right there with him.
Yeah, it's literally just shots of his back, but it's a really arresting back for whatever reason. Like there's so much going on just in watching him kind of navigate these spaces.
Yeah. Just like this physically large dude with the age inappropriate long blonde hair, shall we say. So it's like even when he isn't in his like full get up, like it's a big fucking dude, and it's like, oh, you're visually striking. But then you've got in his everyday life him having the hearing aid, and like I think his coat has got like duct tape on it and stuff like that to repair it. And yeah, it's very humbling. So after he works another local show, he has pitched a 20th anniversary rematch with his most legendary rival, the Ayatollah. There were some international hard feelings about this character, but they are, of course, sort of parodying the Iron Sheik, who was this sort of Middle Eastern stereotype wrestler, and he was a big enemy of Hulk Hogan, who was Captain Americana. So again, I don't get the feeling that he's supposed to have been Hulk Hogan big, but that's kind of what they're invoking. So this is a real WXW show, this first one. Many of the wrestlers backstage are just playing themselves, being called their real names. Most of the ones that speak directly in camera shot are going by made up ones. Like the guy that talks to him before the match, I think he's called like Tommy Rotten or something in the film, but he didn't go by that for realsies. But he's one of the people that helped train both Nicolas Cage and Mickey Rourke, and he is nobody, but they gave him this role of having the first match on screen with Mickey Rourke. And I really find the sort of match walkthroughs that they do backstage really fascinating personally, because like everyone knows wrestling is fake, and you have this assumption that they like rehearse the whole damn thing, like in an empty gym or something, like move for move, and it's like, no, this is what it's like. They just sit down and just verbally are like, okay, we'll do this. Here's a thing I've got. A thing that was like really popular about the movie from like wrestling fans was the comment about, don't work the leg, everybody works the leg, work his neck, because it's so true. Like they pick a body part and they just like attack it boringly until the crowd gets to a bit of a like, come on, and then the good guy has a comeback.
Yeah, it makes it like what I really enjoy about this is kind of everyone knows that stuff is scripted and the winner's going to be decided beforehand based on the billing or based on what the narrative that they're trying to sell in that wrestling league at the moment is going to be.
Yeah.
But like this shows how physically demanding this shit is. Because these people are all fully ripped, fully like in shape people.
Yep.
Really. But also just like how it's kind of a bit more like improv. It's like improv fighting.
Yep. Absolutely.
I don't know, where like you know how it's going to end. You know what you're aiming for, but the whole point is to put on a show and to just kind of like go with the flow of like what makes sense in that point of view.
Yeah.
Like, and you see it a few times in matches where like people see that things are going like sideways or not going how they should be going, and so they kind of go like, right, okay, we're going to do something different now.
Yeah, that is precisely right. You feed it. You work the crowd. If they're not into a certain thing you're doing, you try something else, and like you see it throughout where it's like, use his leg, and he's like, okay, yeah, it's that guy with his leg. You get to see him preparing the blade in his wrist tape ahead of time. I know for sure most people think that blood in wrestling is done via like little blood packs or blood pills or like, I don't want to say a squib because those like explode, but that kind of thing. Surprise, motherfuckers, they cut their fucking heads open with little concealed blades. And
I do have a question for this bit. So obviously like he has a head hit beforehand, and that's when he like the razor out and cuts his head a little bit, and then he gets a second head hit. Is it supposed to be that he got the cut from the first one, or is he preparing?
Yes. So when you see shit like this, they take a big hit to the head. The other guy does something like preposterous, so the crowd is looking at him. The other guy will just be laying face down, covering his head and stuff, so he can do this without everyone staring at him. And then they'll like have him get hit in the head more, so that like it flows a bit more. Not like full on punching in the head, but if you just give him a bit of a concussive force to the head, it will like make it flow more. And
you can even see like because obviously like he gets the like 2 successive hits after this, and he like stops it, but you can tell that like he's stopping himself somewhat to kind of like cushion the blow.
The way it is, it's like it's not that they're not making any contact, it's just that it's sort of a controlled contact. Like boxers know how to pull punches, so you can hit someone and make it look harder than it is, and it's a kind of a lot of that. There is a lot of sort of phantom striking where they've missed completely, but it's like, you're doing this shit live, like you don't get to do a retake, so it's like you have to make a decision in the moment. Do you acknowledge that they missed and not react to it, or do you pretend they hit you and go flying, and sometimes to hilarious results? But there is often a degree of just like they're hitting them just not as hard as they possibly can, and it's a weird fucking thing. Like the stuff that looks really painful probably isn't, and the stuff that looks easy probably is quite painful. Just the simple act of falling to the mat is very stressful on your back.
You get the point where like he's later on when he after this match he goes to the strip club and meets with Cassidy, a favorite stripper of his, played by Marissa Tomei, who is stunning.
One of the most beautiful women to ever live on this earth.
Who was nominated for an Oscar for this role, she's really fucking good in this movie. Possibly a bit too naked for a vast majority of it, but that's neither here nor there. But like he's explained to her there's a scene where he's kind of going through different injuries that he's suffered over the years, and none of them are like, oh, this was like a punch that I took. It's like, oh, I jumped out the ring.
I fell wrong. I accidentally got caught with this. Yeah. There is a lot of that, for sure. She's really fucking good. And I really, like, on his way in, I like him, like, selling or offering to sell painkillers to the bouncer, because a lot of wrestlers have a painkiller addiction and have a plentiful supply of painkillers and stuff like that. But you see, like, this group of dudes, like, rejecting Cassidy for being too old. And these two are, like, mirrored in their sort of, they do very different things, but there is this core similarity of both of them are a little bit too old to be doing what they're doing. And it's sort of a, like, having to play to a crowd in a way, and it's a little bit of a carny type, hard sell type business where it's like you have to go and court their money kind of thing, and like they're both just want to be, well, she wants to get out and he very much doesn't, is the difference. But him like talking to her about his career casually while she's doing a lap dance, it's like, immediately I'm not saying he's getting no sexual gratification from this, but like he is paying for her companionship, he's paying for attention, quite frankly. And, like,
we don't know how long it's kind of been working, but it's obviously he has got this massive affection for her.
Yeah, and I'm not saying he's never sat there and been like, fuck yeah, but like he seems to just be like, I've come here to pay to talk to you, and like if you're naked, cool.
I think she is sexualized, but it's not in the kind of most in your face way. Because obviously, like, you see a lot of her in this movie, and it is objectification, but it's also kind of like, well, this is the atmosphere that we're in.
He's really cutting himself open. He's really taking some big hits. She's really stripping, I guess.
Yeah,
like...
I mean, it's just very interesting to compare it to something like Hustlers, which is a really good movie from this year, which has so many scenes in strip clubs, but there's no nudity.
That's impressive.
But there's also, like, I think there's 2 male actors who have more than kind of like 5 lines of dialogue.
Yay!
It's a really female directed, female written movie starring like female, like, women in all the kind of major roles. It's just really good, and it's all about female friendship, and it's just kind of interesting to watch that movie made in 2019 versus this movie made in 2008, and compare like these two. Like one of the best performances I've seen this year, and one of the best performances I saw in 2008 was Marissa Tomei in that movie, or in this movie, and J-Lo in Hustlers. And it's very interesting to kind of compare the ways in which they kind of treat female sexuality in that. J-Lo is also one of the most attractive women in the world.
Yes.
If you have a chance, go find her first pole dance scene in Hustlers, because it is genuinely one of the most, like, erotically gratifying things that you will see in cinema.
Welcome to the real world where we're giving out, like, porn suggestions to each other.
But she's fully clothed and fully in control of kind of like how her sexuality is being taken.
Yeah.
And it is different. I mean, this is probably like that more realistic, quote unquote, kind of like interpretation of what a strip club's going to be.
Yeah, it's not a glamorous one. Like, this is a like rundown strip club that, not a huge number of girls working there, not a huge amount of clientele. Like,
no, I mean, this is New Jersey. This is very much not the like.
No, you can just stop there. This is New Jersey.
This is New Jersey. Yeah, it's just interesting to kind of compare these 2 movies and the difference in tones over the last 11 years, and they can still both give 2 of the best supporting actress performances I've seen.
And you mentioned him like showing her all of his like war wounds, and she like compares him to Jesus in Passion of the Christ, and like, you've got the hair for it. It's like, I don't think Jesus was blonde, but okay. And I like that, he continues to pay for lap dances, but he can't cover his rent. And it's like, I understand that this is a common thing where someone has a large amount of debt but still spends small amount. Because it's like, it's not like that $60 or whatever was going to cover his rent, but, it's just sort of a sign of where his priorities are, and like, he has to do what he has to do, I guess. I like him afterwards buying the steroids, because, he's taken this big match, so like, we see him over the next few minutes like preparing for it all, and like, like he gets the dye job and the spray tan, and he buys these steroids, and I love this giant meathead's like really fast maths, because he's like, yeah, you got this, yes, that's 35, that's 50, that's 500.
I love the kind of like, he's not just buying steroids, he's buying like so much other shit as well, and this guy's just like, do you want insulin, do you want this, you're like, over the counter medications he's selling him, but like,
I got Viagra, I got whatever you need, man, like, you're old, or just, you use a lot of these things, so maybe you have erectile dysfunction. This dude got busted for steroid possession in real life after this movie, so I don't know if they just literally went to a gym and found some huge fucking dude and were like, could you play a steroid dealer? He's like, fuck yeah, I can. So we then see one of the more famous aspects of the movie. We see Randy working a hardcore match, which is a very violent use of weapons style, sort of just freak show, look at all the blood and carnage style match against the infamous Necro Butcher. You get more money if you do this, essentially. And after receiving medical attention in the back, he vomits and then is rushed to hospital. So I like them going shopping for plunder ahead of time, like cruising this supermarket and like buying like baking trays and like bug spray and all this sort of stuff. I remember Louis Theroux did a fucking documentary on wrestling, his original run of these documentaries before he got like huge, and there was an episode where he like interviewed loads of wrestlers, and there was a guy who would just sit there hitting himself with like big metal objects and stuff and like trying them out, and it's like, Jesus, it's a bad scene, man. Necro Butcher is one heck of a person. His like stoner poet ramblings and like calling everyone sir, and just the giant fucking cannabis leaf tattoo. This is 100% Necro. Like, what you see here is what he did for his not lengthy career, because I mean, you see the kind of shit that he does. Like, of course he couldn't do it for too long, and he's saying like how, oh, you can maybe throw me off the ropes once, but I can't run too much because my knee is fucked. Like,
yeah, I mean, this feels like kind of like they've just kind of gone to this guy who is...
He is the most famous, like, deathmatch wrestler in North America of this era, for sure. There are some dudes in Japan who do real fucked up shit, but yeah, this guy...
I mean, it's just some of the stuff he goes like, are you alright with staples? And he's like, oh, it doesn't doesn't hurt that much going in, but coming out, it's gonna give us some blood loss.
Yeah.
You see, like, I love the way this scene is kind of done, because like
you don't see the end, and then
you see the end, and you don't think they're going to show you that much, and even then, like, they're both just coated in blood, and it just looks like, because it's like he's just been dumped into the table, and he kind of like finishes him off then, and
he like hits him with the big thing and just pins him, and then like, you know, as he's getting treated by the doctor, it's not that like each wound you see how he got it, but just, you know, as he's being treated, you flash back 14 minutes previously and you just see all this fucking wild shit they're doing. And...
I mean, even just the kind of casual shot where like you get that shot of his back and he's walking towards him to pick up the window, and you see the tacks that are in his back, and it's just like, it's just so messed up, but like all of it's done in camera, and you can. I don't know whether or not Mickey Rourke actually did some of the stuff that he does, because obviously, like, there's stuff involving barbed wire that
I think he did an awful lot of it. I don't know if he did all of these incredibly violent moments here.
Because like they did these matches, didn't they? Like they would go to like local wrestling things and just kind of go like, we're going to do a wrestling match as part of the regular evening of.
Yeah, they would like slot it in between like the rest of the show so that the crowd are like there for it and stuff, and they would, you know, just pick a weekend here, a weekend there, and shoot a match a little bit. Like, there's only 14 minutes of wrestling in the movie. I don't know how much they actually filmed, but
but it's some of the most memorable stuff in the movie. It's kind of similar to what they did on Star Is Born, where like Bradley Cooper would kind of like go and follow. He went to a Chris Christopherson gig at Glastonbury and basically did like an opening set for Chris Christopherson at Glastonbury, which is why in the movie, like, it's actual shots of a Glastonbury crowd and they didn't fake it, which is one of the most like impressive things about that movie.
Yeah, it is. These are all real companies. Most of these wrestlers are real wrestlers. All of the wrestlers are real wrestlers, just some of them are changing their stage name, but it's real crowds, knowing that they're going to be in a movie, so, you know, probably being a little bit more energetic than they might be. It's fucked, and it's, again, like, I don't know if it's a complete shock to the system in the way that maybe seeing how they do blood might have been in that first match, but this is a whole other avenue of wrestling that some older stars do get pulled into doing because it does pay more. It's like, I'm not saying they're one-to-one, but like, I don't know, I think of like Kanye songs when he's like talking about porn stars getting paid more for like gangbangs and black dudes and stuff, and it's like, I don't know why that comes to mind.
It's very much like, if you do the stuff that's kind of more taboo, the stuff that kind of like, I mean, obviously, like, we've gotten to a point now where like, with certain things where like you're just desensitized, and I don't think this kind of wrestling would ever get desensitized in the same way that Kanye is talking about, but like, I mean, this is not the kind of thing that you would tune into like WWE.
No, this isn't going to be on TV, man. This is I mean, CZW, I think it's CZW, they hovered around like medium bigness, but they were never getting like a TV deal or anything like that. Yeah, it's just fucking wild, and like, respect to Mickey Rourke for whatever he did do, and like Necro Butcher like briefly enjoyed like a slight bump in like appearances and stuff following this, you know, the wrestler's own Necro Butcher. He's a weird fucking dude, but God bless him. So, obviously, Randy wakes up in hospital. He is told he had a heart attack. He should stop wrestling immediately. He almost died, etc. The frequency that Mickey Rourke's butt is on display, and just sort of him not looking the most glamorous. I think we talked about this with No Country for Old Men. It's like, it's this duality of the, like, you know, because, I mean, he's used to, for a living, walking around shirtless. It's like a glamorous thing, but then it takes on this duality of, like, it's like a vulnerability thing of like a wounded old animal or something. I don't know. So it's like, he really just threw himself 1,000% into this.
Yeah, and his butt does not look good.
No, it doesn't. We learn his name is Robin Ramzinski, and he fucking insists the doctor calls him Randy, and it's like, this is such a thing, like, living the gimmick. That is the like core part of this.
Well, I think it's both living the gimmick, but I also think it's kind of like this. What I think is kind of like something I really love about the movie is this undercurrent of kind of like his toxic masculinity kind of like showing itself in that he's kind of like, obviously he's not afraid to be vulnerable at points in this movie, but so much of it feels like he's kind of rejecting the name Robin because it's so much less manly than Randy.
Yeah, which is hilarious in modern settings, but yeah, it was once upon a time. Randy was like a big tough guy name. Yeah, and like Robin does. It can also be a woman's name, which I think Randy can be as well. But yeah, like I think you're right. I think it's the double-edged thing of like he thinks Randy is a more manly persona, which is why he took it on, and also just like there are so many wrestlers that like can't let their gimmick go, and like we've talked about this as well, like with Jason Bateman in Juno, like struggling to accept this chapter is over. You will never be this rock star again, or whatever. But just the inability to let it go, and like, yeah, no, call me Randy. Like, I am still Randy the Ram Robinson, and everything. It's like, you're not, bro. Like, I mean, you are, but what that is has changed. The promoter, like, leaving his earnings in an envelope at the desk and be like, oh yeah, see you next show. It's like, Jesus Christ, this is a hospital. And then you see him with his fucking NES, with this custom-made wrestling game they built for him and everything, and the kid telling him about
Call of Duty 4.
Yeah.
But I like that. It's one of those things where, like, this scene, it kind of comes off a little bit janky in that it is got very obviously kind of, like, ad-libbed, but it's also like, well, what would a 11-year-old kid want to talk about in 2008 would be?
Well, it's like, someone play this game I own that I'm in, so it's the only game I own. So the kid is, like, remotely interested in playing Nintendo, but it's like, this is, you can tell he doesn't like the game, and he's just like, oh, I just gave you an ass whooping, don't you want a rematch? He's like, nah, I'm good. It's like, oh.
Yeah, I love the beat of him when he leaves the hospital. He gets a taxi to go pick up his car from wherever the match was.
The
that he was
part of. Yeah.
And it's just this empty car park,
yep.
And it's just this depressing overhead shot of.
It's like this secret world type. Like they all gather for these shows, and for like in this specific context in this specific time, he is still a star, and then he's just walking around and no one knows who the fuck he is for the most part. And and I think the car thing really illustrates that as well. Of like, on Friday nights this place is rocking, but now it's nothing. Like it's just fucking dead somewhere in New Jersey. And then you also see him like trying to go for a light jog and just like doubling over in pain. And he visits Cassidy again, tells her about his heart attack, and she makes the suggestion that he reconnect with his estranged daughter, who we didn't even know he had until now. And he reluctantly attempts to do it, and she aggressively rebuffs him. So, you get Cassidy saying, I can't be seen leaving with a customer. Like, he tells her what happened. He's like, oh, can we go somewhere and talk? And she's like, I can't, like, walk out of this place with you. That's a real bad precedent. But the heart attack phrase, it's like, okay, fine, you go out, I'll meet you in 5 minutes or whatever. And their dynamic is so fascinating to me because, like, you sort of go back and forth on, like, how she thinks of him, because it's like, when she's, like, leaving him at the end of this, and she's like, you're gonna be okay, right? And it's like, I do feel she has a degree of fondness for him, but it's like a favourite customer, and the key word is still customer, and she very clearly doesn't see him how he sees her. It's kind of interesting to go back and forth, and, like, as a first-time viewer to think, like, is there gonna be this big, like, blow-up where she's like, fuck you, man, you're just some dude who comes in here, I don't give a shit about you, or is it going to be revealed like, okay, I love you or whatever? And it's like, it's neither. It's both and it's neither. Like,
yeah, that's what I really like about this performance, is that it isn't like he isn't overstepping his boundaries, because he is reading the situation right in a lot of ways. But she's also got this kind of push-pull where it's like, she does have an affection for him, whether or not that is a romantic affection or whether or not it's just like, hey, this is someone who understands me and I can actually kind of like get emotionally close to him. But I also like that she's kind of like, she's only got one foot in this world. The real reason is, like, I'm making money so I can move my son to somewhere where the schools are cheaper and I can have a good life. And so I'm sacrificing this right now, but I have no intention of staying here and doing this for the rest of my 40s.
I'm doing this because I have to, and, like, he is, like, clinging desperately to this thing he thinks he can still do. Obviously it's not quite the same, because she didn't, like, grow up dreaming of being a professional stripper in the way he would grow up dreaming of being a professional wrestler. But, it's this sort of, like, I don't want to call it dirty, but, like, kind of grungy, like, lifestyle. There is a definite...
I mean, yeah, there are people who get into sex work for reasons of, like, empowerment and reasons of, this is something that makes me feel good about myself, and she's definitely not that.
This is
a job. This is a job that obviously she realises that she is good at. Maybe she is kind of like, in terms of what the clientele of this particular strip club want, she is not necessarily what they're after, but she realises that she is a very attractive woman who can utilise her sexuality to earn money, even if she kind of like, not resents it, but kind of like, it is very much kind of like, this is a job, not a...
Yeah, I mean, she fucking says, career. Like, I'm not a stripper, or like, you think I'm this and she's like, that's not who I am. Like, I am not this person. Yeah, it's great. But speaking of great, Evan Rachel Wood as Stephanie. It was Abby Cornish recast at the last minute, but good, because she's great. And like I said, how I feel the length is about right, and it's not like I think anything needs to be longer. I maybe would concede that I think she needed a little bit more, but like what she's giving us is fucking great. So.
Yeah, I think the only kind of like the two scenes I have an issue with are the scene with the kid in the trailer, just because of kind of like it feels a lot looser than some of the other stuff in the movie, and also this first scene with Evan Rachel Wood. Even though she's absolutely killing it, I think they're kind of rushing along at kind of about 60 miles an hour to kind of like info dump all this information of their backstory, so they can get to the kind of like more meaty emotional stuff in kind of like her next couple of scenes. But like this first confrontation where like she turns around and goes like, here's our backstory right now and I'm very angry at you.
Because it is very like, has he not seen her for 20 years? You kind of get the impression that like he was majorly in her life for a while, and that he maybe was a sort of inconsistent presence, but like before they actually start speaking, it's like is this the first time she's seen him as an adult? Like, who knows? She kind of makes this false assumption that he's coming to her she's like, you want me to take care of you, like fuck you, where were you you never took care of me, where were you for all my birthdays, you probably don't know what my birthday is, like all of that is like valid, but like she is actually wrong about why he's come to her.
Like she thinks it's for the worst reasons, and it's not that. He's not coming there for kind of like her to take care of him. He's coming there because like he wants to mend this bridge, because he realizes that he might not be around much longer. Also just want to give props to this movie for letting queer women be queer on screen. I mean, obviously Evan Rachel Wood was not out at the point where she took this movie on, and that was a couple of years later, but kind of like taking on this role and her role in True Blood, I think the writing was very much on the wall in terms of like her persona in kind of the upcoming years. But yeah, she's really fucking good in this. And she doesn't get to do anything this good in Westworld, sadly.
So he seeks advice from Cassidy, and she's like, buy her a present, get her clothes. Like, that's a good, like, because he doesn't know what kind of music she's into, he doesn't know like any of her hobbies. And
is she a goth? Is she preppy? Is she like, what's she like? Is that she's a lesbian? Does that affect
I think
the aesthetic choice?
Lesbian? Does that affect any of this? And she's like, no. It's like, well, I feel maybe it might. But before that, you do see him attending this like signing event for like quote unquote legends, and these are they can be a tragic thing. Like, there are certain wrestlers that like work the signing circuit, as it were, and like seeing them have to set up their own like little stations and everything, and like I really like him looking around the room, and it's like he sees the crutch, he sees the wheelchair, he sees the catheter, and it's like, gee, like, and he is by far the healthiest fucking one of them there, and we know he's not in a good way. So it's like this like ghost of Christmas future type thing. Yeah. And before she agrees to go with him, Cassidy is like, she's like rejected repeatedly by customers again, and like then she's like grateful to see him, and you get the sense this is their relationship as well, where it's like sometimes he can be a bit like he is in the first scene, where he's like a little bit overzealous, and she's like, dude, like fucking let me work. But then there's probably nights like this where like no one is interested in her, but she knows he's good for it. But then you get his heart condition, he's like, yeah, probably best I don't get an erection right now, quite frankly. And like she looks a little bit kind of like dejected by that,
even though you don't want to put your self-worth on what men think of you, you kind of do in those situations where like when you are literally like, I'm offering you sex and you keep on getting rejected, it kind of just wears you down in terms of like, I am putting myself in this very vulnerable space, and yet I'm being constantly rejected, and so she is the one person who she thinks won't reject her.
And then when like she does agree to go with him and everything, and like when she shows up and he's like, oh, I almost didn't recognize you, you look clean, and I was like, Jesus. and saying, should I call you Pam or Cassidy? So it's like, oh, so he does know her real name, so they must have at some point talked about this. And saying, again saying like, you look so pretty in the daytime. It was like, oh dude, you are stumbling on the wrong side of this. But yeah, and she does look so different, like turning up in the hat and the coat and everything, and I really love how much he loves that horrific green jacket.
It's one of my favourite bits in the movie.
And he's so like, terrible. Hey, what do you think of this? And I'm just like, And he's like, "That's got an S on it." And I was like, "Yeah, dude, read the room." And she's like, "Oh, maybe a nice pea coat." And he's like, "I don't know, I'm liking the green jacket."
I mean, it's my favourite bit is like when he goes to give her the present, he gives the coat first, and I genuinely can't figure out whether or not like he actually was going to give her one thing and not give her the other thing, or was it always a joke, or was it just like, I'll try the pea coat, and if she rejects it, then or doesn't act enthused, then I'll give her the pea coat.
I think he realised that she's right and went back later, I guess. I don't know. Because he doesn't walk out with it, I don't think. I think he walks out with just the green jacket. Or maybe I'm wrong. And then he, of course, convinces Pam Cassidy, to go get a beer with him. And she tells him how she's going to quit and move. And his awkward, hell yeah, dance with me, baby. Like, it's like, oh, you are so this guy who, like, yeah, this was real fucking music. As they're, like, saying that, you know, that Cobain pussy came and ruined everything. And yeah, like, them just reeling off the generic big 80s bands, like, sounding like just someone's uncle or something. I don't know.
I love this scene
it's
because
great.
It's so much is kind of like these two people are trapped in a nostalgic period that doesn't exist anymore.
They're very much coding her as the like 80s stripper dancing to fucking Def Leppard and stuff. Like, I'm not saying that was like the heyday of stripping, but it's like that is very much
I mean, it doesn't want the songs to come on and say that I've danced this song too many times, or like I know this song inside and out because I've done this so much. Yeah. And so he does his little stripper dance. It's just like needlessly like, like everything got shit when like Kurt Cobain came on the scene and stuff like that, or like just this kind of like I hate the 90s vibe and
fuck the 90s.
Fuck the 90s, and this very much kind of like these are two people who are living in an idealized version of like the past, and so like they're latching onto it. I mean, it's weirdly one of those like kind of political statements nowadays where like there are people going like, oh, don't you remember like how good we used to have it? It's like, but you didn't have it good.
No.
Like, the music you're listening to isn't good. You just like it because it symbolizes a better period of your life.
Yeah, because you were having a good time at that time. You think everything from that time was great. And it's like, no, not really. And also, like, Mickey Rourke is, like, good friends with Axl Rose, so I think some of that is, like, you know, doing him a solid and saying, yeah, fuck Nirvana, Guns N' Roses forever. He does try and kiss her. She sort of returns the kiss, but then immediately escapes the situation. As I said, like, this back and forth dynamic they have is fascinating. He accepts retirement. Like, he cancels all of his wrestling bookings. He takes a weekend job for steady income. He has to wear a hairnet and a name badge with his real name on it that he really does argue about. And there's this masterful scene where he's, like, walking from the back and they put the audio of, like, a wrestling crowd.
I love that it fades out
as he steps through the curtains, or it's like the whatever they have there. It's like the plastic curtain, I guess, but then it like cuts to silence. It's like, oh,
yeah,
well done.
False expectations. It's again, it's that thing where like it's not even an acting performance. It's just a combination of the kind of like fantastic cinematography from Maurice Alberti, who is like a first time working with Aronofsky on this movie, because like normally his regular cinematographer was off doing, I think at this point probably doing stuff like Iron Man and Iron Man 2 and stuff like that at the same time.
Mickey Rourke.
I know, just constantly working with Mickey Rourke. Oh, apart from not doing this movie. But yeah, like, it's just everything technically kind of comes together in this scene.
That's great.
It's so good. And because again, it's not relying on Mickey Rourke. Like, for a movie that so much is focused on, like, the advertisement is, the Mickey Rourke's name is almost as big as the wrestler in terms of the title. Like, he very much is a one-hander with Marissa Tomei and Evan Rachel Wood as very much supporting actors, but there is interesting stuff going off in terms of like just how the movie's shot, how the movie looks, what the movie's thinking about, that does elevate it above being simply like a movie with a performance.
And you see him getting to banter with customers a little bit. Like, he is obviously like a professional showman, so he has that charisma. Like, he is good at talking to people, and he like he conducts himself. I think so, yeah. And he conducts himself with that confidence of like, hey, what's going on? And they're real customers, some of them. Like, there's a real deli counter, and they had him behind it, and then real people started approaching him trying to buy stuff, and Darren Aaron was like, try. Like, try and serve him.
I love the bit where he, like, tells the guy to go long, and he looks so perturbed.
He looks like he's trying to walk away. Like, he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then he, like, gets it in his car anyway. And like, hey, good looking and stuff like that. To this, like, I don't want to say he's an ugly man, but, you know.
It's just a change, because it starts off so slow and him kind of, like, doing it in kind of the most dull way, and then by the end of it, he's having an absolute blast, because he's interacting with people.
And, like, maybe he would be a fucking nightmare. And you see it later. He's bad at the rush hour, because he wants each one to be, like, a special sparkly, let's have a little joke and talk for a minute, like, interaction where he does something silly. And it's like, that's not what you want when there's a big queue.
Yeah, but as we know, people want us to give good customer service, all the time.
The most important thing. Sometimes good customer service is, like, just giving them what they want and shutting the fuck up. I quit the company, I can say what I want. So he does try again with Stephanie. He gives her the presents, and she goes with him on a walk to, like, on like one of the Jersey boardwalks, and he apologizes for his absence, and this is all just great. Like, as you said,
I love how it's shot, because it's like you're focused on Mickey Rourke's face, and like his eyes are welling up as he's kind of like saying, like, I'm a broken piece of meat, but you just see her hair kind of like floating into the camera. That shows, like, even though there is like probably someone with like a little handheld camera there kind of like shooting this, they are still having this conversation between each other. Like, he's not talking to the camera, he is talking to an actual person who's there, and it feels so close and so intimate and just so damn good.
And saying, like, I'm alone and I deserve to be alone. Like, these devastatingly, like, honest, self-reflective statements. Like, it's... And then, like, her, like, linking arms with him, like, means everything.
Yeah, because like this is like, I prefer this because so much of this is unsaid in terms of like she's realizing a vulnerability that she's potentially never seen before.
Yeah,
and so this is her kind of like letting her guard down and going like, right, I'm gonna let my dad back into my life. Like, he is doing and saying the right things at this point that I need to trust him again.
Yeah, and it's like real fucking easy to sit there and be like the equivalent of like, girl, dump him or whatever, you know, just like fuck him, he's made too many mistakes. But like, it's not as easy as that in real life. Having him there, and like, she probably has to actively try to not let him in, and then like, you know, that he's making it, like, showing her that vulnerability in that moment, and like them dancing together in the abandoned ballroom and everything,
which is stunning and beautiful and amazing.
Heck of a location they found there. And also the symbolism of, like, you know, him in a venue that is, you know, is long past its prime and everything, and would have once been like all vibrant and everything. And then what does he do? He parties a little too hard. He has to sleep all day. He misses his dinner that they've arranged with her, and she says, I don't want to ever see you again. And this all is triggered by him going to Cassidy and her, like, trying to let him down gently and be like, look, dude, I'm not what you think I am, all of this. And like, he then lashes out with this ugly attempt to he's like, well, come on and fucking dance for me, like, here's the money, like, shake your tits and everything. And it's like this, just completely recontextualizing the relationship and like how repulsed she is by him in this moment, and however many years of goodwill and like being a nice polite customer are like undone in a second.
I love that little beat of kind of like the security guard coming like, dude, come on, and you think it's going to get aggressive, but then the guy's just like, oh no, you're like, they chill out the moment they're away from her.
And then this sort of causes him to go sit in the audience for a show and go for drinks afterwards with wrestlers and get coked up and bang the fuck out of a woman with a fireman fetish.
I love the fireman fetish.
A great
so
weird
much.
beat. I like that he's wearing the boots in the morning.
It's just like her entire... It's so... The single bed, the room being entirely decorated with like fireman stuff. The fact they covered up the ferret with...
Well, they're nocturnal, I think. So.
I know, it's just a wonderfully kind of like set design.
Yeah. It's
weird,
like, what a weird beat, but perfect.
Because like, because even then, even when they're at the thing, you think it's just like, oh, do you want to party like a fireman? You're like, right, what does that mean?
What does that mean? And I'm with him. I'm like, what? Sorry? Like, this isn't just like cool young person speak he's missing out on. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
And I love like when they're having sex in the bathroom and just the look of disgust from the woman's face when she walks in. It's just like,
go get a room. It's like, we're not fucking stopping. So, and then Stephanie just devastated, like, that she waited in the restaurant for 2 hours, and we are trained to see these moments coming in films. Like, it is kind of a cliche, this like, oh, he genuinely didn't mean to, but he fucked up this time. And her line of like, I can't cry for you, like, it's so so true to life, and like I feel most movies want you to be like root for him and be like, oh come on, he didn't mean it, let him in. It's like, nah man, like so that we don't know what their life has been like, and like how big it was for her to briefly let him back in. And like in life sometimes you don't get a million second chances, and like he fucked up.
I love the kind of like, it's such a casual kind of fuck up, like you know immediately that he's fucked up and this is the last straw. But I love like when they're on the floor and she's like, I don't hate you, I don't love you, I feel nothing for you. Is so heartbreaking. And Eva Rachel absolutely fucking kills this scene, and she's so good. And while she doesn't get quite as much as like Marissa Tomei in terms of characterization, like these kind of like 3 or 4 scenes that she has in this movie, she is so good in all of them.
You feel every minute of her performance. It's
even if I'm highly distracted by the set decorator kind of going like, what would hipster lesbians be into in 2008? And she's like, Vampire Weekend, we'll just put a massive Vampire Weekend poster in the background.
It's just, and like him like pouring at her hair and like saying, I know you hate me. It's a heartbreaking little scene, and like he kind of, this is it, like, you know, his life of choices has led him to this fuck up, and he kind of, like, given how it ends, like, this is the triggering point for sure. Like, I think he had this romantic idea in his head of like, I will get Cassidy away from this life and raise her son and my daughter and everything will be great. And like, sorry dude, you can't just will that into existence. Like, people have autonomy, like they are not props in your little play of your life. So yeah, he quits his job, he signs back up for
he quits his job in spectacular fashion.
Yes, like slams his hand into the fucking slicer and like cuts his thumb. Yeah, he's
coats himself in blood, kicks things as he leaves, swears at people. It's just a terrific outburst that's so theatrical in kind of like exactly the way like he I mean, to use a wrestling term, he does a heel turn.
Look at you go.
In the middle of the shop. It's good, it's over the top, but
I really like the little less, little more lady. Like, you know, less. He's like, a little less, a little more. And then he eats it to get the last. And I'm like waiting for her to be like, did you just fucking eat my pasta? Because he's like chewing it while talking to her. But she just lets that go.
I mean, customers don't pay attention to what you're doing behind the register.
No, they do not. Can't tell that story ever. Aronofsky's parents are, I think, 2 of the annoyed deli customers. That's nice. And then it's that dude that recognizes him, and he's like, not now, man. I've been through a lot in the last few weeks, and like, this is not the time. And you get the idea that, like, on some level, or in a different context, he would love to be recognized and someone to be like, I know who you are. But it's like, not now. I am at an emotional, like, powder keg moment. I kind of am trying to leave this behind me and not be... Like, he has so desperately only been this thing, and now he has tried real hard to not be it, and it's blowing up in his face. And yeah, this dude, like... So yeah, he signs back up for the anniversary match, and Cassidy does come and try and talk him out of it, but he ends up... I kind of don't want to talk about the end until the end, because it's so its own thing. But yeah, like, her coming to apologise to him, but staying firm about, you know, I have a line, I can't cross it, and her then quitting her job, like, mid-routine, almost, and there is this little moment where she walks out, and one of the other girls is like, oh, you left your shoes, and there is an old tradition in wrestling where when a wrestler retires, they leave their boots in the ring. And I have to think that was a conscious nod to that she leaves her shoes. I mean, I guess it would have been more poignant if she'd left them on the stage, but she tries to save him, quite frankly. Like, she buys the ticket and, like, grabs him just before he's going to go out, and it's, like, shaking her head like, dude, you can't do this. Like, you're very hurt. And it's not that... And again, in another movie, she would have stayed and watched him from the stage and be like, wow, look at you in this setting. You're magnificent. But she can't... She's got no interest in watching him kill himself in the ring, and she's just out of there. It's great, quite frankly, like, and like that's the end for them. Like, she's like, I'm fucking here, man. Like, I came. Like, I've kept you at arm's length, and I'm finally like willing to maybe... I don't know if she's like coming to him to be like, hey, maybe let's go be a couple, but like...
Definitely to kind of like take their relationship to a different level to one they have at the moment. And he just kind of made the decision, which is like, no, I've tried to have this normal life outside the ring. I've tried to be mundane. I've tried to get away from it, but this is the only thing that works for me. I need to be the big strong man and go out like this. And the world doesn't give a shit about me. And she's like, I'm fucking here. And it's like, it is a tricky
tricky thing where, like, when you are courting attention and it isn't immediately there, to just lash out in return, and then when genuine attention has come your way, you either stubbornly won't take it or, like, just can't see I don't know. But it's this haunting little moment. So this show is, they are backstage at Ring of Honor, which would have been the biggest company available to them if they are working, like, the non-national, like, the independent level of wrestling. This was the biggest independent wrestling company in North America at the time, so it was big that they were doing this, and I think these are the shows that Nicolas Cage was coming to. He wasn't going to the, like, 50 people in a weird little town in New Jersey shows. He was coming to these. And there are a bunch of Ring of Honor wrestlers, like, dotted about, and some of them are now quite big famous guys who work for WWE and stuff. It's kind of wild seeing them now and looking less pretty than they do. And playing his opponent, the Ayatollah, Ernest the Cat Miller, who was really nothing in wrestling, and it's kind of wild that they were like, yeah, we'd like you to be this big rival character. I don't know, maybe he, like, got into acting and they found him that way, but it's kind of weird. But yeah, him coming out and, you know, he does his big entrance and he gets on the mic and he does his, like, heartfelt speech about how, you know, he is old and he is feeling it and he's not as pretty as he used to be, but the people will dictate when he retires. And it's real and raw, and, like, I think the crowd was sort of booing him a bit in real life, and then Aronofsky had to be like, guys, this is, like, super important for the movie, and, like, this is his big final match and everything. And then the crowd chanted, we fucked up, and, like, got really into it for them for the rest. And, like, fair play to them, like, they're not doing the best job in the world in any of Mickey Rourke's scenes. Like, my hat is sincerely off to him, because these are, like, this is him doing all of this. I think he can pull off some of the big moments, but, like, the moment-to-moment stuff is very... But, I mean, they were zooming right in, so it kind of has to be deliberate, so that it's not too obviously fake, but, yeah. But the crowd being so into it does really help, and, like, you get this sense that it's like, hey, he has been performing in front of small crowds that, like, barely know who he is anymore or whatever, but, like, this is the big hero's welcome type moment, and, like, look, it has all gone perfectly as you imagined. Like, you are back in front of a crowd that is loving you, and him just clutching at his chest, and, like, there's the, like, ringing in his ears and struggling through all of this stuff is... You can feel it coming long before it does, and you get, like, Ayatollah being like, hey, let's take it home, which means going home, it means finishing the match. And you said there is this expression of, like, going home early, where it's like, look, so this isn't going well, let's just fucking end this. And he says, like, we've given them enough, and he's, like, having to, like, do moves on himself and be like, just fucking pin me, man. He's like, no, I want to do the ram jam. And it's like, because that's his big finisher, he jumps off the top rope, and it leads us to this gorgeous ending.
Yeah, like, this whole segment is so good, because it's so close and so intimate, and the entire time you know the match is going south. Like, you can obviously, like, Bob the Ayatollah in a wonderful bit of, like, he looks vaguely foreign, so we'll just make him be,
I know, like, this dude is African American, and they're like, yeah, go play a fucking Arab stereotype. Like, I can see why some foreign dignitaries were offended by this movie, but like,
the thing I love is that it's so much of a kind of commentary on.
Oh, for real! Like, this is, like, one of the most famous wrestlers was Yokozuna, who his gimmick was he was, like, a sumo wrestler, and they dressed him like he was from Japan. Dude was fucking Hawaiian or Samoan, I think. Like, and it's just like, yeah, you look vaguely foreign, you get to be this stereotype, and it's like, it's very true. Like, they did not do this with racist intentions. They did this as a commentary on, like, real life. Like, get mad at wrestling in the 80s, don't get mad at, like, The Wrestler, the movie, which did not.
I mean, to be honest, the people who are commenting are the kind of people who are, like, don't understand subtlety and nuance, and just kind of, like, take a depiction of Islam as, like, at face value, in terms of, like, any depiction of it is being critical of it, as opposed to...
I mean, like, he does break the flag over his knee and everything.
Yes, he does.
Again, this is wrestling shit. This happens.
But yeah, this whole segment is gorgeous. I can only imagine imagine it being distracted watching it in the audience, where like you have someone walking around with a camera in the ring, filming them do these things.
They have cameras there anyway for like taping the DVDs and stuff. But yeah, being like right up in the ring is definitely not a thing.
And I think this is the longest stretch we get here. Clint Mansell's score for. I think he only wrote kind of like about 8 or 9 minutes worth of score, which they kind of perfectly deploy a bit in the movie. It's just this kind of like nice slow build. I mean, it's not as bombastic as his Fountain or his Rockin' for a Dream score, both of which have kind of like become trailer music in the years since.
Yeah, just the stuff of legend.
Yeah, and obviously we'll definitely touch on Clint Mansell's score next week. In our episode, which is probably his best non-Aronofsky score. But yeah, just like everything kind of builds in this, with him kind of like clutching his heart, and Bob the Ayatollah is like lying on the floor, kind of going like pin me, and he climbs up onto the ropes.
Yeah,
and looks out to see whether or not Cassidy or Pam is watching him, and she's not there.
It's a like bravely not good shot almost, like it's this almost clumsy zoom, but it just really works here, and just sort of looking around the crowd and just like taking this all in, and like I think he says in the front of like that, you are my family, like this is my family or whatever, and it's like, you know, everything has just gone so badly for him as he's attempted to not be the Ram, and here he is just to rapturous applause. They love it, they want to see him do it, and like he knows I probably shouldn't do this, but like this means so much to me, and that just beautiful ending of him jumping over the camera, and just you see like to the very tips of his boots fly over the top.
Yeah, and then it fades to black. You hear the crowd.
You don't know. And
you don't know.
So they
hard cut to silence.
Yeah,
and
is this meant to be the hushed silence of the audience? As this man has died in front of them, or is it just it doesn't matter? This is what he chose. This is the narrative here, and they filmed him hitting the move, getting the pin, and surviving. But I believe in an AMA, Aronofsky confirmed that he dies. Neither of those matter because the text.
Yeah, they're not on the screen. It doesn't matter. Like, this is the movie. This is the way it ends. It ends with no conclusive answer either way. You can choose to see whether or not he lives. You can choose to see whether or not he dies. It's however you prefer to see it.
Yeah.
I don't want to think about it. Like,
I don't either.
My partner asked me last night whether or not I think he lived or died. I said, I don't think it's important. I think the important thing in this movie is this kind of like man trying desperately to come back to like what his glory days were, and succeeding for 15 glorious seconds.
Yeah, and yes, exactly. He will literally live or die by this moment. And I have slated the sort of indie ending, and like we talked at length about No Country for Old Men, and like I like it here. Like I think there are times where you can have an ambiguous ending but still have a satisfying narrative, because the end of his story was right there. Like, this is what this whole movie has built towards. It's not almost an ancillary character talking about a dream 10 years later or whatever. Yeah, it's beautiful, and Bruce Springsteen's song The Wrestler is a gorgeous, gorgeous song. It's, you know, if you've ever seen a one-trick pony, you've seen me. Like, oh.
Yeah, this I love this movie. I as I said at the start of this episode, I think Requiem, Fountain, Wrestler, and Black Swan are all like 5-star masterpieces. Aronofsky's the only director I can say has got like 4 movies which I would gladly put in like a top 10 movies of all time. There are probably like other directors who I adore. Like, I mean, I love Fincher, I love Cuarón, all very kind of like basic film bro kind of like people to love. But
you called Cuarón your favourite working?
He is my favourite working. Like, I've enjoyed both Noah and Mother, but I don't think either of them are.
I read the goddamn plot synopsis for Mother, and I was deeply confused.
Mother is exactly my kind of thing. I walked out of that cinema feeling like I had been emotionally abused for about 2 hours or however long it is. I really like it. I think Jennifer Lawrence is fantastic in it, but it's also not a movie which I would recommend to like most people to watch.
I think it would piss me off.
That's the thing, is I think it would piss most people off. I was just very much like watching that movie. I think it's less.
Look, I get it. You say to Aronofsky, "Fuck me up, Daddy," and like he does. he knows what you like.
I'm so sad that he didn't get to do a fucking Wolverine movie. Instead, he did fucking Noah of all things with with like Emma Stone, with Emma Watson and Ray Winston. It's
I think his Wolverine would have been incredibly interesting, but if Mangold hadn't gotten to make that incredibly dull Wolverine, he may not have made that incredibly lovely Logan. So
it's a trade-off. I've got no idea where Aronofsky's up to the moment. We'll touch more on Aronofsky and
you know what Aronofsky wouldn't have done? He wouldn't have done the whole fucking weird racially charged farm clone fight weirdness bullshit that wasn't necessary in the otherwise good father-daughter story. Yeah. Anyway, that's a completely different podcast.
I love this movie. I think this movie is... Yeah. This was probably one of the first kind of like big boy Oscar movies that I...
It's wild to me that this somewhat niche interest of mine got a fucking movie that is good. and like, I've seen so many awful basketball movies, I've seen so many bad video game adaptations, whatever, and to see something like this that is not, it was once one of the most popular things in the world, and they still have millions of fans or whatever, but it's a very different, it's not cool, and to see it get a light shined on it, and not the big thing that everyone knows, but this like other corner of it, the independent wrestling that was going on at this time and was like artistically wonderful, and to see it treated with reverence and presented to the public, and they didn't have to like preface it with anything, like they just presented it as is, and that people took to it, and that it's good and popular, and it didn't make a ton of money, but like it's a well-regarded thing, and it's like, this is cool that
it made 44 million off of like what budget it had. It got 2 Oscar nominations, both of them for acting. I think it definitely should have got some more technical stuff.
Yeah. But like as someone who was reading a Transformers comic on the way home, wrestling is the most embarrassing thing I like, and to see it like here in something that is actually good, thank you for picking it. I thought we were going to be watching Requiem, which I wouldn't have minded. I've seen Requiem, I don't dislike it, but yeah, you picked the one that is more up my alley.
Yeah, that's the thing is, I could have done any of the 3 Aronofsky movies from this decade. I went with this one just because it holds a special place in my heart. Just in terms of like, this is probably like, I'd seen Dark Knight, but most of the stuff I was seeing in cinema in like 2008 and 2007 was kind of like very obvious movies, like, I'm going to see superhero stuff and I'm going to see big budget comedies and all these other things, and this was the first time that I kind of went out of my way to go like, I am going to watch a movie that will be nominated for Oscars at the cinema.
I used to go and see stuff like this once upon a time, and now nothing can make me leave the house.
I say probably the first. Like, I saw Benjamin Button in cinema. I saw Slumdog Millionaire in cinema. Like, I was seeing things that were like Oscar baity, but this one is probably kind of like one of those kind of like firsts.
Well, this has been emotional and special, but we must leave it behind. Who knows what happened to Randy the Ram Robinson? What we do know is next week we are going to have a very fun time talking about Sam Rockwell in Moon. I am very much looking forward to it. Moon is fucking dope.
I watched Moon probably less than a year ago at this point. It's just a really nice British movie.
I like to watch Moon every like 2 years and just be like, oh man, still good.
Just a shame that Duncan Jones has not done anything close to as good as this since.
Do not talk shit about Mute.
Did you like Mute?
I haven't seen Mute. I'll talk shit about Mute. I didn't see it. That is for next week, though. In the meantime, go to intotherealworld.com. Like, comment, subscribe. Get us on Twitter. Will Be Movies. Ask us questions if you want. We will answer them. Just like 6 people that follow that account. But
I know, but we retweet it from our accounts, which have more followers.
There you go. But, if you ever want to get us, ask us dumb film questions, ask there, and listen to all the stuff we got on the site. And, next week we're going to space, I think. But are there movies for us to watch on the in-flight space travel, Ben? Are there movies?
Yeah, there will be. And there will be Kevin Spacey.
Oh. Bye.
Still I didn't know, and I did